All of them.
Okay.
All of them. I think for not speaking to Tuzo came before, I would just say to a person that thinks that we don't have any influence in them, it may be based on the perspective of how you're looking at, let's say, economics, sciences, and business.
All
A
right.
lot of
So I'm a quantify influence, right? Influence that affects positive and consistent change for the community.
that would for people of color.
Yes.
Now you shifted the dynamics of thought.
I mean, because what you said is correct, right? I think that it is impossible to exclude people of color and their influence in these categories completely, right? There is some level of influence in all of them, right? But when you look at, or if you examine the social condition of people of color,
Right.
which one of these, does our influence directly impact positive and consistent change?
For who? For us?
For people of color.
That's I will have to put more thought into that as far as positive. Sheesh.
You want me to quantify that too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I say positive, right, you have the onset that, I'm gonna just use this word for the sake of conversation, right? You have the onset that things like suffering or things like disadvantage, that rationale is decreased,
You said increase or decrease?
right? So there's less suffering or there's less disadvantage because of your influence
And you're talking about as a whole,
as a whole,
as a collective.
as a collective.
Bruh. That's tough.
Okay.
Because if you're just talking about us,
I'm talking about people of color.
people of color.
And we
But
can only
it's-
speak for
that-
the areas that we
Right.
known in our existence in this life.
Right.
I mean, all good.
Can't speak for all of them.
I mean, but that's what's relevant for us today and right now.
Well,
I understand.
like Kazak said, we're all wrapped up in all of that. So if all of that we're wrapped up in, and it comes down to a position of making us to a point of a lower state, I would say all of them can affect us at a lower state or a higher state or a higher consciousness. It depends on what people. If we're talking about a whole, is to me it's really hard to quantify. To me,
Okay.
because I can look at the religion part. I can look at the religion or spirituality part. I can look at the politics part, because they make stuff just for us,
So let's do
not
this.
for everybody.
Let's just do this right here, right? Let's talk about the family dynamic.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, in your opinion, and I'm going to take out the consciousness of people of color
Okay.
and I'm going to apply it to the family structure.
Okay.
How does our consciousness affect, or what effect does our consciousness as people of color have on the family structure?
For people of color.
Yes. What do you see?
Okay.
Single parent households.
Okay. So you say single parent households.
Okay.
Okay.
Parent households. You see some people that don't have a lot more money than most blacks. I mean, most other people in that, in that situation. You have poor. You got some people that's what they would call poor, and then you have people that has a lot of money.
So you're talking about like different social classes,
Right. You have-
economic classes.
right. Which is economic.
I'll say this, because it's hard for me to speak on a whole when I haven't been around United States to see the whole, I can only speak of what I've seen, which is experiential. And again, coming to the States, being in a West Indian, or my West Indian household, let me say it like that, because everybody's not the same, even though I say West Indian. So I seen a lot of based on the principles in Christianity, from the older generation. I'm I guess first, second generation, because my mom, then me. So I've seen people that come from a culture, right, that is grounded in what we consider Christian principles. I'm not gonna say they're fully Christian, but Christian principles is very much put together.
Okay.
And that's also in the South. I see that, whether it's what we call a single family household, that the family still kept everything together. So from my example is my mother, but then I have my uncles, then I have my grandmother, still had I still had relationships with my father, but not few and far in between, because he was still on the islands. Seeing my grandfather, so I still saw interaction. And then coming to America, I was in Yonkers, so I grew up with a lot of Dominicans and Hispanics, and same principles. They were very, from what I saw, structure and mother, father was there.
Right.
So it's not until I got a little bit older and moved to Florida, and then started seeing more single family households, but even then you still had a connectiveness of the community.
Right.
So
which I would say we may not have right now is a connection of
the community
when we're talking about a single parent household. Now, I'm not saying single parent households is bad, because I'm basically come from one.
Right. Likewise.
But my mother did remarry, so it did put some a father figure in the house or what have you. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have a connection with my father.
Right.
But he always came through when he came through. Me personally, I wasn't really looking for him to come through, but when he come through, he came through, and we built or whatever. We had our issues, but sometimes we didn't.
Right. It's interesting because we can say we've touched on that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, our results aren't what we see magnified on social media, what's magnified in the media,
right,
what's magnified in some cases by people around us.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So
which those items those are the dynamics that portray influence. Those
right,
things which are magnified, or those things which gain the most attention.
Right.
So if we're talking about the things that gain more attention and things that are more gain more traction, then we're going to talk about a lot of negativity. You
Facts.
See what I'm saying? And I this platform and knowing you brothers where we stand, we don't promote negativity. Mm-hmm. So when the question like you're asking, it's hard to wrap your head around it when you move in circles that maybe you have touched it, maybe you have been a part of it at some point in your life, but as you've grown away from it.
Right. So, as you grew away from it, right? You, based on whatever that influence was and how it affected you, right? You landed on a path where you created positivity.
Right.
And then because of what you created or because of what you were introduced to, right? You then connected with other like minds to shift that paradigm.
And on the contrary, what I've seen is those who have not been able to disconnect from a certain mindset, they still connect with others of that same mindset to keep the perpetualization of that lower frequency or vibration of thought.
So what I'm hearing in is that the influence generally, right, is a perpetualization of that thought process, which is not going towards a direction of change.
Yes.
Rather, it's, well, you know what? It's all good if our households are broken.
Right.
It's all good if we our family structure is inculcated in a thought process where it's okay for us to not deal with each other, not talk about the issues that we might have, so on and so forth. Right? It's not pervasive in media where we actually sit down at a round table, right, and we learn how to problem solve through complexity that comes up in the family.
Right. Which goes back to when I said all of these things influence us. I couldn't think of anything necessarily fully positive.
Got you.
Because the influences. So let me go back a bit when you said thought process.
Right.
When you say thought, I think automatically vibration, energy, and frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So let's substitute thought with those words.
All good.
You're saying that people they're in a certain frequency, and they continue to perpetuate that frequency and that vibration amongst each other, which comes down to the education, the music or entertainment, so on and so forth. So it's like I have friends that, I could say we have like minds, but at the same time, they may have more groundation in that kind of mindset. So I have to protect myself. And I hate using that word, but I have to be very mindful of what I feed into.
Well, don't hate using the word. You know what it is that you've learned how to navigate through frequency.
Right. Discernment.
Right. Which I think that's the key point that we take away or we extract from what you're talking about.
Right.
Right. You learn how to. Okay. Well, you know what? That frequency right there, I'm not going to be able to. I'm not in alignment with that.
I'm going to throw a monkey wrench at you
Okay.
because it's been said to me. So how do you know you're not stopping yourself from learning something new or experiencing something that you could come out learning something from? You know what I mean? Like certain types of music. You may not listen to a certain type of music, and I'm like, man, you should listen to it because it's good. Or certain types of shows, or just different experiences that you may have an idea about, but you haven't watched it, so you can glean something new, and it may be educational and informative to you. How do you know you're not? How do they say? Stopping a blessing.
Well, that's to assume that you consciously or subconsciously getting your way from learning, even though you make a choice not to tune to a certain frequency.
Say it again.
That's to assume that learning stops.
Okay.
Whether you get in the way consciously, like that you're doing it, or you don't and you do it unconsciously. That's to assume that. Well, you're not learning.
By not going through this door,
right?
You could be missing out.
That's an assumption.
That's a complete made up construct because even by not going through the door, you're still learning something.
You're still learning.
You just may not be choosing that class to learn from.
Right. And what's to say that you haven't went through that door before?
Right. Especially when you get on the other side and that you already been through that.
But now you can't go back through. You got to experience what's on that door.
And you have to
because you made a choice.
You made that choice.
Normally what'll happen is, right, and this has been my experience, until you have learned the lesson, you're going to keep going through the same door. I mean, and again, that's tuning into self, right? How certain practices affect you, how certain frequencies influence you, right? All of that.
It's we've had these conversations before, and it's tough because the same way you want to look out for other people, they want to look out for you. So you might be telling them, hey man, like, listen, like, a statement I've said is I'm far removed from that.
Right.
And it's offended people. And it's not to say is anything wrong with you being in the midst of it.
Right. It doesn't.
It's just that's not a frequency I want to vibrate on. And it's not to say I can't teach the person something, because that would be the argument back, right? Like, but that's an opportunity to show the person that's in the midst, that they, share your experiences and how you got here. But at the same time, if a person loves to be there, I've learned that it is not for me to try to make someone see my perspective.